Welcome back to the Partners of Commercial Fishermen podcast. I love you all, the partners out there, the fishermen, the supporters of, the family and friends. And if you're new here, we're so thrilled to have you sit with us or walk with us or run errands with us or drive your car with us, whatever you're doing when you listen to this podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. We're here every week talking about the nuances of the commercial fishing lifestyle. And one of the biggest nuances, I don't even know if it's a nuance, but as we know, fishing is one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. Accidents happen, and when they do, it is critical to have the right legal support. And I know legal support can feel really intimidating, but let me tell you, this is why I'm stoked to have Attorney Michael Flynn speaking with us today. In this episode, he covers various aspects of maritime law and commercial fishing safety and the complexities of maritime jurisdiction and settlements. Attorney Michael Flynn, he discusses the legal protections for fishermen, including case examples, such as one case that changed his perspective on commercial fishing that involved a vessel that sank with crew fatalities. Heartbreaking. We also go into the importance of proper documentation, what that looks like, immediate reporting of injuries, and seeking legal representation in any maritime injury case. And I'm also proud to say that Attorney Michael Flynn is now a sponsor of the POCF community. And through this episode and the next week, you'll see why. I am super protective of our community, which means I only partner with people and products that are high quality and truly best serve our fishing families. For that reason, consider Michael Flynn your go-to contact for any questions about commercial fishing personal injuries that may arise. He also offers free consultations, so you can decide on the next best move for you, and he's super easy to contact. I'm going to put all of his contact information in the show notes, and I'm mentioning it in the episode, but I'm going to share it with you here too. You can contact him by phone or text. He loves a text message, and who doesn't love an easy text? You can contact him at 617-773-5500, through email at mflynn, that's MFLYNN at flynnworkus.com. That's FLYNNWIRKUS.com, or on their website, spelled the exact same way, flynnworkus.com. I'll say it one more time just to make sure we got it. That's FLYNN Workus, WIRKUS.com, flynnworkus.com. Can't tell y'all how thrilled I am to have Michael on. He goes into detail about so many different things that we'll learn here, and definitely stay tuned into next week's episode because he talks about even goes into even more in-depth information that we need to have on the backhand, but he also answers some questions that our community has submitted through our private communities and through Instagram on our comments and our DMs. So you'll definitely want to hang on to next week as well. So thanks so much for being here, and let's dive in. I'm Megan Waldrop, host of the Partners of Commercial Fishermen podcast, an extension of an online community for partners to connect and feel less alone. Our podcast invites fishermen, family, friends, and supporters of the industry to learn, laugh, vent, and hear stories about this incredibly unique way of life. What do you say? Let's dive in. Attorney Michael Flynn, thank you so much for being here. I know a lot of people in our community are really excited to hear from you and to understand what kind of legal rights commercial fishermen have, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole list. So thank you so much for being here. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about your background. Like, where are you from and why were you called to the legal profession?
Thanks, Megan. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always great to talk to you, and your passion for what you're doing is just so infectious. So on behalf of everybody that I represent, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks.
And I'm glad to be a part of what you're doing. I grew up in a town called Westfield, which is in the western part of Massachusetts, nowhere near a fishing port, has nothing to do with fishing. But it's a town where, at least my perspective was, we felt like we were the underdogs. And I think that was kind of compared to other communities. And that's what kind of gave me this David Goliath attitude growing up. As did my own family situation. I mean, we were pretty middle class, right down the middle. But middle class, always struggling to make a living, fighting the fight. And so I think from what my dad did and my mom did, and kind of where we were, I had that attitude that I'd like to champion the cause of the underdog. What a better place to do it than the legal field. I'm a trial lawyer, so I played sports growing up, played a little in college, and so that competitive fire, the legal system when it comes to trial work is one party versus another, just like Red Sox and versus the Yankees, Patriots versus the world, whatever. It's a competition, and the winner takes the spoils. And then I didn't know this at the time when I decided I wanted to be a lawyer, but it kind of, like a lot of the things I think I enjoy doing, whether I do them well or not, is always subject to some debate. But I like to talk. I like theater. I like creativity. I like trying to figure out a puzzle and build a case. And all of those things are very important, I think, to a trial lawyer to be successful. So that was kind of what led me into it. It's kind of I'm kind of happy that I'm doing it. And I had this. So I started college at West Point, the military academy, and I was there for a little over 2 years. And it was a real struggle deciding whether I wanted to stay because military or the it's a very prestigious place, and you basically have a built-in career coming out of there that can take you into some great places. And but I decided kind of like, nah, that's really not for me. And that's when I really decided if I'm going to pursue a career in law, I'd better make this decision now and get off the military track and get onto the legal one. So, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
I love that. I love your background. I love the underdog spirit, which I feel that connection with you, talking to you and seeing you speak in videos before, of just how much you champion people who you represent. And it means so much. And also, on a side note, my dad's a West Pointer, so I definitely
no way.
Yeah. I'm an Army brat.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So my Army brat experience came from my dad going to West Point. He was a career officer, and seeing how the military spouses handled the deployments of their loved ones is really one of the main inspirations of creating the Partners of Commercial Fishermen community, because I felt that, we didn't really have any support, like emotional support like that. And so that's how that all came about. So I love the small world in that way.
I got to ask you, when did your dad graduate from
oh man, when did he graduate? 70. Oh man, was it 78, 9? I could be getting this right. 77, somewhere in the late 70s.
A bit older than me. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's retired. Yeah. He's a retired colonel from the Army, psychiatrist. So that was the path that he ended up taking. Yeah. Wow. Love that. So I love it. Go Army.
You go Army, beat Navy. We'll talk more about that offline. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So speaking of Navy, now we're going into the maritime field as we exist. Sure. What is your first experience with commercial fishing and fishermen?
Well, the first job I had out of law school, I worked for a firm that specialized in representing a commercial fishermen. I didn't last there very long, and then I ended up going into a big firm that kind of was on the other side of things, to be honest with you. And I ended up representing railroads for a long time, but I never got the idea how impressed I was in those first formative months of my legal career about representing fishermen. And I thought that if I ever had an opportunity, I try to get back to that. And that opportunity presented itself about 10 years ago. And we kind of made some significant changes at the firm, and then have dedicated our practice, not 100% to that, but we're a personal injury law firm. We are 100% dedicated to representing people who have been injured in accidents and have been the victims of workplace negligence. And about 50% of our clientele are commercial fishermen from primarily the New Bedford, Fairhaven area, but we represent fishermen and have represented injured fishers from Maine down through Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and as far south as Virginia, with an occasional case from other jurisdictions. Because of some of the unique aspects of the law, we're really able to represent people throughout the country, including North Carolina. I've had a couple cases in North Carolina.
Oh, that's great. So even though you're based in Massachusetts, you can represent fishermen from, let's say, California or Washington, if need be.
Right. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. And right. The law is federal in nature for the most part. So if a fisher is injured on a boat, they don't get workers' comp. Um, they get paid something else, which is called maintenance and cure. It's a federal common law doctrine, so it's made by judges. It's very ancient. It traces its roots back to like the 1400s, 1500s in England, when shipping and commercial fishing started. It was started before that, but that's really when the law started to develop. And we've kind of taken a lot of old English law and made it our own. But the pain and suffering injury component of it. So maintenance and cure is basically a living stipend. Right now, it averages about $34 per day. And cure is the obligation to pay medical bills for curative treatment of any injuries, conditions, or illnesses that develop while the fisher is in the service of the vessel. There's no wage component to that, and there's no pain and suffering. So it's a very limited ability to recover from maintenance and cure. A sad thing about maintenance and cure is there's a lot of ways that a vessel owner can try to defeat it. Number one. Number two, the vessel owner is only obligated. And when I say vessel owner, we're really talking about is the vessel owner's insurer, right? So the insurance company or the vessel, they're only obligated to pay those medical bills and those living expenses until the fisher has reached a point of what's called maximum medical improvement, which means that if a guy blows out his back, let's just say, okay, a fisher blows out his back, and he's herniated the disc, he or she, and they have a surgery, they go to post-surgical treatment, they go to 3 months of physical therapy, and they're done, and they're still on pain-killing medications, and they haven't gotten to the point where they actually can fish again. But the doctor says, there's nothing else that we can do for you other than palliative care, manage your pain. Nothing we can do for you is going to make you better, get you back on your feet to fishing again. The obligation to pay for those medical bills end. So it's kind of it's a harsh and limited remedy. But that's maintenance and cure. The trade-off, I guess, is that in 1920, the United States Congress, adopted something called the Jones Act, which imposes on vessel owners the obligation to provide a safe workplace. And if a fisher is injured because the vessel failed to provide a safe workplace, and that injury was caused in whole or in part by that negligent failure to provide the safe workplace, then the fisher can recover significant damages, including pain and suffering, lost wages, and the like. So those are the two big remedies available. There's another doctrine called unseaworthiness, which is a form of strict liability, and it requires the vessel to be fit for its intended purposes. And there's a number of conditions that can cause a vessel to be unseaworthy. And if a vessel is unseaworthy, then the vessel owner owes damages for that as well. I talked a lot there, but I hope I answered the question that you were raising. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're answering questions that we all have floating around in our heads. So thank you so much. I have a question about the not being able to pay living wages. So this just came to me as you were talking. So is this something where a supplemental insurance like AFLAC would come in if someone wanted to purchase that? I believe that's the insurance company that pays you for if you're injured on the job.
Yeah. There's nothing that I know that would prevent the fisher from taking out a disability policy on themselves. I'll be honest with you, I've never seen that. I've never seen that from any client that I have. But it would seem to me that it would be a good idea. The one thing that I have a bias against insurance companies because, I'm up against them all the time, right? And insurance companies are always crying poor mouths at the same time that they're pumping billions to lobbyists to get laws favorable to them. And it seems like every time you turn on a football game or something, who's the stadium named after? Insurance company. Who's the Sugar Bowl sponsor? USF&G. It goes on and on and on, right? But that little editorial aside, one of the most misunderstood aspects of personal injury law, and this really affects clients because they can't get their mind around it. And we have to tell our clients right off the bat about it, is lien recovery. Okay. So maintenance, and this is why maintenance and cure is so important, is if the vessel pays maintenance and cure, and when we get our client, we really demand that it be paid. And we work very hard in our office to make sure that we're doing what we have to do to stay on top of the vessel owner's insurance company to make sure it gets paid. Because if they pay it, that when the Jones Act part of the case is settled, or the personal for the pain and suffering damages, there's no set off for what they've paid in maintenance and cure for the most part, and they don't have a lien against it. So, whereas if there's a private insurer that has paid the medical bills for an injury, okay, that at the end of the personal injury pain and suffering part of the case, that insurance company is going to have its hand out, and they're going to say, we have a right to be covered. We have a lien, which is a right to get reimbursed for everything that we've paid, which, to get back to the editorialization, then why the hell do we pay premiums if they get their money back anyway? And how does an insurance company go to Congress and say, oh, runaway verdicts, and, what are you talking about? I mean, you're overcharging us for premiums. Then when you get your money and there's a lawsuit, then you got your hand out at the end of the lawsuit. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yes.
Here?
Yes.
So now here's the kicker. So a lot of our clients, that if they're not getting maintenance and cure, or if there's a problem with that, Medicare, state and federal, will step in and pay. There's something called the Medicare Secondary Payer Act. I don't want to talk too much about this because it gets us away from fishing. But what that is if a fisher fits into a certain category and Medicare, either through the state or the federal, has paid any of the medical bills for an injury-related treatment, they get paid back. And they have the strength of the federal statute, and it's very draconian. There's penalties, and if you don't take care of them and pay them back, they can really come after you hard. The lawyers, the insurance company, the vessel owner, and the fisher. So we have to make our clients know that right away, right? That at the end of the day, there's going to be an accounting. And if we settle your case for, $1 million and there's $200,000 in medical bills that Medicare has paid, we got to pay it back. So it's going to come off the top. And like I said, people have a hard time understanding that because they think, well, I paid my premium, or there was some insurance, or the Medicare was a handout. Why do they get it back? But they do.
Interesting. I think you gained a lot of fans when you said that you're biased against insurance companies. Just so I feel like you're not. You're preaching to the choir here. Yeah, and I understand. I mean, it makes sense that not a lot of fish. Oh, go ahead.
No, I said we could have another podcast about that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But we, that it makes sense that not a lot of fishermen have supplemental insurance like Aflac, because we have so many other bills and costs that takes to be a fisherman and a fishing family.
Exactly.
So that makes sense. Okay, I'd love to know, what case changed the way that you look at commercial fishing? Was there something that stands out to you?
Oh yeah. So it was the first. Sinking involving the deaths of crew members. In that case really introduced me to the personal tragedies that there's really no recovery from. And so this was around Christmas. I'm pretty sure it was 2017 or 2018. I always forget the year. And I found myself with my client service coordinator, who's really kind of our boots in the ground in the community on the docks. Jim Comfort's his name. And Jim called me and he said, you got to get down to Fairhaven. I want you to meet the widow. Well, the time we didn't know, the vessel had sunk right around Christmas time, and they had not yet recovered. They hadn't found the vessel, and they hadn't recovered the body. But the widow, Tammy, I'm keeping the names confidential for various reasons. So Tammy got in touch with Jim or somebody had, and we went down to her house and kind of spent some time with her, which was weird because it was in the middle of the grieving process, which had begun but really hadn't, because what's going on. And So Tammy, wanted to know what to do. And I think she was more concerned really with just making sure that the Coast Guard was working with her and trying to find the vessel and recover her husband Mike's body. And in the course of doing that, about a day later, we find out that the vessel owner, who was given press conferences where they were talking about how concerned they were for the families and everything, they went down to New Jersey and federal court. This was the sinking happened off the coast of Nantucket. All of the families were from Massachusetts, and this vessel crewed and home ported out of New Bedford or Fairhaven, and they go down and file a federal lawsuit in New Jersey before the bodies have been recovered. And I just thought the
Hastiness
of doing that while these people, like I said, were in grief, but they hadn't even begun the grieving process yet. And it's another aspect of the law, which we can get into if you want, but they were taking advantage of this archaic federal law that's still in place that gives the vessel owner certain rights that they can take advantage of. And that's what they did. They didn't have to do it, but they did it. And they did it at a time, like I said, where they hadn't even yet recovered the bodies, and their public face was how sympathetic they were. So, at the very least, they could have filed that action in Boston in federal court, where they knew the families were. But my impression of what they did was they were trying to take advantage of the law, but also the venue. So they were trying to file it in New Jersey. It was just going to add a wrinkle of difficulty logistically and whatever else for those families to file litigation. And what it did was it forced the family to answer that lawsuit if they wanted to have any claim at all. So there's a lot more to that. But when that happened, I was like, wow, this is really something. But it also was like, I'm where I should be. And these are the kind of people that I should be representing against this kind of activity on the other side.
Wow, that's completely heartbreaking.
On
that note,
it was awful.
Yeah, that sounds terrible. I can't even imagine. Speaking of vessel owners, because there's a lot of vessel owners listening. Mm-hmm. My husband's a vessel owner. What, woulda, coulda, shoulda. What are the best ways for a vessel owner to approach something like a tragedy like this? If something happens aboard or somebody gets hurt, or worst case, he perishes at sea, how can a vessel owner take accountability in a way that will be respectful to the families, to the fishermen, and also able to protect themselves and their families and their vessels or their company? What's the best way to do this?
So I don't represent vessel owners, and I'm not in any position, Megan, to advise vessel owners how to protect themselves. I'm on the opposite side of that. Okay. And a lot of times what vessel owners' activities after an accident are dictated by the insurance companies and the lawyers they hire. Okay. The case I was talking about was, and there's a big difference in my experience between vessel owners that own all that might own 10 or 20 boats, they own the distribution, they own the fish processing plant, it's a major operation, totally different from a person who owns a boat. Maybe they own two boats, and they were fishers, they were greenhorn one day. They came up through the ranks, first mate, captain, made some money, thought, hey, I'll buy a boat and are fighting the good fight. Those are totally different things. And it's been my experience that the bigger ones are the ones that tend to be, in my view, more callous. And the smaller ones tend to be a little bit more concerned, and some much more concerned about the health and welfare of their fishers and what happens after an accident. That said, it seems that most vessel owners are concerned about kind of circling the wagons after an accident and protecting themselves from the inevitable lawsuit versus reaching out to the fisher and figuring out what can we do to help you. Now, again, I'm not going to advise a vessel owner what to do, but I will say this. When I get a case, okay, it doesn't take me very long to kind of sit back and say, what's the value of that case? How much is it worth? How much can it settle for? And most of the time when it settles, I'm pretty close within, a couple percentage points. And the point I'm making there is that what happens between the time I first get that case and the time it settles, that could be years. And there's litigation and, depositions are taken and motions are filed and there's a big fight. And at the end of the day, it settles for the same thing that you could have settled it for on day one. And so you ask yourself, I've always asked myself, what if the vessel owners and the insurance companies just called me instead of hiring a lawyer and said, look, what does your client need? Like, what can this case resolve for? And that rarely, if ever, happens. And I've often thought maybe that should happen. Now, I'm not advising vessel owners to do that because, that would be run counter to actually defending themselves. But it seems to me that there's a different way to do this, and nobody's really explored that too much.
Interesting. Thank you for explaining all that. I have a question about, I know there's a term for this and I can't think of it right now, but what at the point of an injury or an incident, do fishermen have the right to report that injury or incident? There's one subject that we're constantly talking about, whether on the podcast or in our Partners of Commercial Fishermen community, and that is safety. And here's a hard truth. Did you know 8 out of 10 fishermen lost at sea weren't wearing a PFD? It's time to change that. At Kent Safety Products, they make life-saving gear designed for real fishermen. No bulk, no hassle, just protection that works when you need it most. They also have the most Coast Guard approved PFDs on the market. So whether you're fishing in hot or cold environments, a fisherman can find one to fit their needs. And partners, let's just pause for a moment and think about how much it would ease stress to know that your fisherman is protected each time they go to sea. It's a lovely thought, right? And as a side note, we only partner with companies that have heart, those who truly want the best for our fishing communities and have high quality products. That's why I am proud to have Kent Safety Products as a sponsor. Visit kentsafetyproducts.com and find the right PFD for you and your fishermen. That's kentsafetyproducts.com. Is there?
Yeah. Well, they do and they have to, but they oftentimes don't. Okay. Biggest problems we see factually with cases are guys that get hurt or women that get hurt and either don't report it right away because they're afraid, right? There is a culture, and it's real, that you've got to be tough. You can't complain. Lord knows you don't want to be 3 days into a trip with the permit days counting and you get hurt and you want to break the trip. And you don't want to be that man or woman that does that. So that culture dictates that even when an injury happens, they might stay quiet about it. And that's always going to come back later and haunt them, because then the first question before a jury is, you say you were injured on Tuesday, the July 10th. You didn't report it until Friday, August 15th. And so now the jury starts to get skeptical. So reporting is important. Immediate reporting, just regardless of what the potential ramifications what might be. The second thing is, and this is especially evident with our clientele where English is not their first language. They get to the hospital or they start treating with a doctor, and the mechanism of injury is not recorded correctly. And there's really no way for the client to know in real time whether or not the nurse or the doctor is getting that correct. but it's really, really important for the fisher to make sure that whoever's getting down what they are explaining happened gets it right. So I can't tell you how many times the initial medical records are wrong, and then that can be used against the client once it's into a litigation. The third thing I'd add about this is there is protection for retaliation against certain what are called protected activities in the workplace. And that protection actually comes from OSHA. And so there's something called the Seamen's Protection Act, which is a statute which gives OSHA jurisdiction over what are called whistleblower claims. And in certain industries, commercial fishing being one of them, pursuant to this Seamen's Protection Act, if a fisher, an employee, takes advantage or is engaged in there's a whole list of them of protected activities in the workplace. One of them would be reporting an injury. Okay, the employer cannot retaliate against them for doing that, and retaliation would be firing, blacklisting, that kind of stuff that the fishers are so afraid of from a cultural perspective. So if that happens, this isn't pursued often enough, in my opinion, by fishers, but it's there. If that happens, they have the right to file a whistleblower action with OSHA. They only have 6 months to do it. So it's a very short timeline to get that rolling. But there is theoretical legal protection at the federal level for them. And we've successfully pursued a few of those cases. Yeah.
Just to clarify, when you say report, it has to be to a medical professional so they can have it in medical records. That's what is going to be more binding. And
that should be the report to the captain. That should be the first report. Okay. And then it's up to the captain to do what they have to do. Okay. Depending on the injury, there's a federal statute that requires reporting to the Coast Guard immediately and via a form. It's called USCG Form 2692. But that report has to be made. And that can just be simple as, Cap, the hook hit me on the head. I'm not feeling well. Can I take a shift off? Make a note of it. Also, what a fisher should do is tell the first mate, and they should tell at least one other crew member, okay, and ask that the captain make a written report of it. Now, depending on the vessel and depending on what kind of procedures the vessel has set up, there may be a vessel that has a written accident form, fill it out. And be accurate about it. There may be a vessel that, the captain has a logbook, put it in the logbook, depending on the circumstance. So reporting to essentially management and doing it in real time is really, really important. The second aspect is what you got to, which is if you're hurt bad enough, get the medical attention. And when you get the medical attention, make sure that it's reported accurately. If you don't speak English, try to bring an English-speaking person with you so that you know that what you're saying is being recorded accurately. The other aspect of this is preserve evidence. So if something broke and you can possess it, take it. Okay. If the captain won't take a recorded report, send him a text message. Do something and then preserve it and save it so that you can cover yourself later on down the line.
Send a text to yourself or to your loved one, your partner, wife, or your significant other. And even though you might be out far enough at sea that it's not going to send right away, it will once you get within range. So don't worry about that. And also consider even using another app on your phone, the Notes app or a document processing app, anything to make a contemporaneous notation that will preserve in time what happened and when it happened in case you're ever questioned later. Because, as I've been mentioning, the number one defense to these cases, other than we didn't do anything, it's a dangerous occupation, we don't have to make it safer, is the accident never happened. And, you got to preserve the fact that it did.
Always think what happens in 6 months from now if it turns out my injury is so severe and I can't work and I have to sue. Because nobody wants to sue. It's only when you have to. think about it in those terms. The other thing I'd say is call my firm. The best thing you could do is get representation right away so that we don't get a case a year later with all these issues that we have to take care of. It can still be done, but it makes obstacles that we have to take care of.
Oh my gosh, this was a wealth of knowledge. I have a question about. Oh yeah,
can I add one other thing?
Bring it on.
Because I have this in a case right now. So for the first 6 months after an injury, the client went to a urgent care clinic, which was had a contract with a relationship with the vessel owner's insurance company. And they were, there's no orthopedic surgeon there. And this guy needed orthopedic care. So he's going to see these, physician's assistants, which are great, fine, but they're not shoulder surgeons. And so they don't really know what to ask. And so for those first 6 months of records, there's really not an accurate understanding of what's going on. Finally, the client sees us and we're like, you got to go to an orthopedic surgeon. He goes to the orthopedic surgeon and the orthopedic surgeon gets it right. But there's still this 6 month of bad medical records. The other thing about that is when you report an injury, the insurance company what would happen is you report to the captain reports it to the owner reports it to the insurance broker. They then hire an investigator. Okay. And the investigator, there's only a few of them that specialize in maritime accident investigations, and they owe their existence 100% to the insurance company. So guess who their bias is in favor of when they come out to take your statement. Okay. So my advice to my clients is you never give a statement to an insurance investigator, ever, under any circumstances whatsoever. Okay. And when the insurance investigator comes, if you don't have a lawyer by then, you really should have one so that the dealings with the insurance company's investigator are handled by your lawyers. And you're not going to be in a situation where you give a statement that invariably kind of comes out against you. And so we see that all the time as well.
Wow. Okay. This just added to my list of questions on this subject about the insurance. So if an insurance investigator comes to you and they want to report and you haven't called Michael Flynn yet, can you deny it? Can you ignore it? Is that going to be a legal complication if you just say, hold on, I need to establish my attorney? Like, how does one go about that if they don't have representation at that moment?
It's as simple as that. I have no problem giving you a statement at the proper time. I just feel like I should have some legal representation at this time. Let me call a lawyer and my lawyer will be in touch with you. It's that simple. And chances are, we deal with the same guys all the time. So we know them, they know us. It's a little bit like that old Looney Tunes cartoon, the sheepdog and the wolf. I don't know if you remember seeing that one before.
More questions, of course, especially about this topic. You mentioned if you're going to a clinic that you may not have a specialist, let's say, able to give you ask the right questions and provide a medical record that would be viable in court. What if you are in a remote part of the country? Because there are a lot of fishermen who live, let's say, in Alaska and don't have access to specialized doctors. What do they do in that situation if they want to make that medical report, but they're not able to speak to somebody who is more specialized?
They have a right to. And so they should be, again, if you have a lawyer, your lawyer is going to handle that. And your lawyer will negotiate with the insurance adjuster and say, hey, listen, my client is hurt. They're nowhere near the proper facility. They need to go to XYZ, regional medical center. That's the only place they're going to get the correct care. I'm demanding that that's where they go. That's where they're going to go. A lot of times we actually will send clients to doctors that we know that specialize in whatever injury they know. And we've really never had a problem with that. There's other industries that I've worked in where that's a significant problem, where the industry, the company, is demanding that that the injured worker goes to a doctor or a facility that they're in charge of. You see a lot on construction site cases, for instance, where there's a occupational health facility which owned by the general contractor. But definitely they have a relationship. And there's limited services that can be provided there. And typically that's where the employee goes first. But then a lot of times they do it on their own. They recognize this is not an injury that we can really handle. It's more than a sore back. It's more than a trip and fall. This is something where they've torn a rotator cuff or they've herniated a disc. We got to get them to a specialist. But if they don't, then that's where your lawyer's got to step in and say, hey, they're not going to go to where you want to send them. They're going to go where they want to get the right care, and they have the right to do that. A lawyer will do that. Logistically, I understand it might be difficult, but that can be worked out. And then the final thing I'll say is I'll go back to the Seamen's Protection Act and OSHA. One of the protected activities is getting the medical treatment that you want. And the employer cannot retaliate against you for demanding you get your own doctor and not one that they're hiring or pointing you to.
Got it. Okay. So within the protocol of reporting to the captain, reporting to the Coast Guard, reporting to a medical professional, if you've done the captain, the Coast Guard, and now you're at a place where you can only reach a clinic, is that going to hinder you? Do you go to the clinic and get that report that may or may not be as legit as going to a specialist? Or do you do the report to the captain and, text them if they don't report it down and take a screenshot of that text, report to the Coast Guard, and then you have those on lock, and then you maintain your legal representation and then go get your report from a medical professional? Do you see what I mean? Like, what happens if you need that legit report? Do you wait?
No. From my point of view, the earlier it's going to sound self-serving, right? Criticism. Yeah. You want to get hired, it's your business, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. But I'm telling you, you're really going to get protected. That's the best right treatment. And that the evidence in your case starts to get preserved from the earliest point of view. One thing I wanted to say about the Coast Guard and the sequence you gave. So let's get back to USCG form 2692. There's a federal regulation that triggers that reporting requirement. And it's not every marine casualty that has to get reported. There's a list of them in the federal regulations. As it relates to injuries on a commercial fishing vessel, it's when the injury is severe enough to require more than first aid, okay, which would be a Band-Aid and some Tylenol on the boat. And it prevents the fisher from being able to perform the physical duties of their job. So when those two things coalesce, that imposes an obligation on the vessel, usually the captain, to number one, immediately call the Coast Guard when those two things come together. And two, within 5 days, report using the form 2692 to the Coast Guard. The significance of that report is it creates a record that something happened, but there's also a box on the second page of that report that requires the vessel owner to identify what the cause of the accident was. Okay. And so you hope that they if it's something that they recognize they were responsible for, that they honestly answer. Okay. If they don't, then they're on record as lying to the Coast Guard. So you kind of got them in a conundrum. So I just wanted to just clarify who's responsible for filing that report and under what circumstances. One other aspect about that, what we see oftentimes is an injury happens that does meet those requirements and no report is filed. That becomes a violation of a federal regulation for failing to provide the report, and it gives us a significant leg up in the ensuing litigation because of the ramifications of a regulatory violation in a personal injury, fishing personal injury case, which is something we could talk about later. But that hurts the vessel. But back to your sequence: report it, record it, okay, represent it, which means get a lawyer, okay, issue medical treatment, kind of in those four things. Now, if you're out at sea, the only medical treatment you're going to get on is on the boat. That might only be first aid, but if the injury is significant enough, you got to stop. You got to cut the trip if it's significant enough, and if it's really bad, the Coast Guard's there. You call the Coast Guard, and I've had plenty of cases where they'll send a medevac, a helivac, and they'll either send the cutter or they'll send the chopper, and they'll remove the injured fisher from the vessel and deal with it that way.
I love it. So report it, record it, represent it, and then seek medical treatment. Was that the order that you?
That's right. Yeah.
So to reiterate what you said, it's report it, record it, represent it, which means lawyer up, call Michael Flynn, and get medical treatment. Is that correct?
That's right. That's
okay.
Right. And,
I love this.
That's right. And, get your initial medical treatment, and the two things about the medical, make sure they are getting it right, number one. And number two, if they don't have the requisite specialty to treat you, demand that you get seen by the requisite specialist. If you've hired a lawyer, the lawyer will do that for you. But you got to make sure you communicate that to him or her. But that's crucially important and can definitely affect your outcome.
I love it. Okay. And then one last question on this. When you said procure evidence if possible, does this mean taking pictures? This doesn't mean like taking something from the vessel, right?
That's right. You're not stealing anything. No. I have had cases where clients have, a plank is broken. Okay. And they've actually asked the captain, do you mind if I take the plank? And captain said, sure, whatever. So fine. They're going to give you permission to take it. Okay. The other thing is photograph it, and photograph it a lot. You can, sometimes I got a client, did you photograph it? Yeah. Okay. Give me your photographs. Okay. Well, it doesn't really show. I don't know what the hell that is, so the photographs aren't great. Take a ton of them. Make sure that you get it right, because we don't have to use all 100 photographs. So it's funny. I was on a vessel. One of the things that we have the right to do, they allow for an inspection. So you can demand that you get to go on a boat and see the boat. So I was on one recently where it was a very interesting case where my client contracted COVID while on the boat. They were fishing in July of 2020 and got really sick. They had bad COVID. So I go on a boat and I took about 250 pictures. And I'm kind of zeroing in on, the crew quarters, because how can you safely fish during COVID when you're not supposed to be close to each other and everybody goes down? This is a 7-man crew on a scallop vessel. And I take about 200 photographs. And then 2 weeks ago, I deposed the owner. And I was trying to get pictures of all the vents and stuff to try to demonstrate whether or not they actually recirculated air or took air from fresh air. And he mentioned a couple vents in like the engine room or something. And I said, well, show me on the photographs. And he said, well, I've gone over your photographs. He said, I can't believe how many photographs you took, but guess what? You didn't get those. So I guess I didn't take enough. 200, I should have taken 250. So you never can take too many photographs is my view. Anyway,
okay. That's good to know. Take those photos, hit those angles with anything that you need, all of it. Okay.
That's right.
That's it for today, y'all. Tune in next week as we continue our conversation with Attorney Michael Flynn on the Jones Act, the Seamen's Protection Act, and the proactive education partners and fishermen need to know before and after an injury, how a case is managed, and most importantly, how fishing families get paid. As a big bonus, Michael answers the questions you submitted through our private community chat and in our Instagram comments and DMs. And if you have any questions about this episode, you can email or call or text Michael directly. His information's in the show notes. And if you need me, you can find me at POCFpride.com. Again, thank you so much for being here. If you liked this interview, please comment or give us a rating on the podcast, any platform that you're listening on. It really, really does help. And we really look forward to hanging out with you next week. Until then. Thank you so much for listening. To support our community, I'd so appreciate it if you'd tap the subscribe button to this podcast or write a review. And if you're a POCF who wants to connect further, go to POCFpride.com for weekly vlogs and to learn about opportunities to join our private communities. We'd love to have you.